The Wall Street Project celebrates its 16th year of creating awareness about financial opportunities and access to capital. This year, the theme is Wall Street from Wall Street to Main Street, economic parity, and the struggle continues. Reverend Jackson, it's so important that we recognize the value of what you have been doing to raise awareness about the issues of financial relationships when it comes especially to the minority community. The largest holder of capital in the minority banking community is held in Asian banks. Is a coalition of minority banks helpful towards creating a momentum of local capital project developments?
Harlem and Wall Street on the same island. The original source of capital on this island was the slave trade. The commodity in the commodity exchange was African people. That's why you have the African burial ground down where the Federal Plaza is today. At some point, they moved blacks from Wall Street to Harlem, past what was in the trees, now called Central Park. So we were a source of capital at the very beginning. Now you have the extreme wealth on one end of the island and poverty on the other. And so we must now go from recession and recovery to reconstruction. What's the source of capital behind all these skyline buildings? Pension funds. Trump, pension funds. Casinos, pension funds. You look at the mass amounts of wealth in state pension funds and labor pension funds and church pension funds. These monies must be more effectively used to build for the communities that have been left out. Last year, when the banks 2 years ago were in big trouble, we bailed out the banks who drove the recession by their greed and lack of oversight. We left out the people who were victims of bank behavior. There must not now be some plan for reconstruction to offset the recession. There's nothing wrong with us. There's something wrong with the formula. And an effective use of pension fund monies can go a long ways toward the reconstruction. We should develop what amounts to a reconstruction development bank. What is the Marshall Plan? Except for 50-year loans at 2% government secured. It's not a grant, not a gift. It was a loan plan. They use it in Japan. They use it all over the world. We need a development bank whose mission is to develop undeveloped areas.
And not look at it from a minority perspective.
Well, the fact is, we as a people invest in pension funds. Often the pension funds that we invest in are not using our interest. They're just, we buy our own rope. Pension funds be used to green line and red line zones. Often pension funds are used to make the red line redder, to keep us more locked out. And so clearly, ethnic development and Latinos and blacks and Asians, all that's important. But the way the system is running now, it's more a vertical gap between the top 1%. More and more have, few and few have more and more have less and less. So we must fight for a system that makes capital accessible. For example, there are 50 million Americans in poverty. Numerically more white than black and brown. Percentage-wise more black and brown than white. But those persons are unbankable. They need access to capital. And often these are working people who pay into pension funds. Mm-hmm. That's a huge source of resource.
Well, most of the access to capital through large funds such as pension accounts are usually held in investment banks. How would this effort be helpful in changing the way investment capital is used in the minority banking kind of an idea?
Well, the idea would be that you take the zones where you have the most unemployment. You take a place like Harlem, it's now being gentrified. Always was choice property between the two great rivers on the same island. And most Harlem residents were renters. As they push Harlem renters out, they're bringing in new condominiums. Those condominiums are basically funded by pension fund monies, for example. And so that is yet another example of why we should develop the idea of long-term low interest loans. In the last 5 years, we've lost more funeral homes, more radio stations, more TV stations. Infant mortality was number one. Short life expectancy. We've lost more car dealerships. So while our political stars are rising, the White House and all the like, political stars are rising, our economic fortunes are diminishing.
The recent summit that you held in New Jersey assembled a large group of leaders to discuss economic issues. What was the outcome?
Well, many of them are coming to New York for the summit. I asked the question, how many of you, for example, what is the percentage of blacks in New Jersey? Said about 15%. How much state pension monies are there? About 80 billion. If we would imagine 10%, that would be 10 billion. 15% would be 12 billion. If we imagine that kind of money, because what happened is that as blacks became empowered in Newark politically, they moved the unions and treasurers out of the city and began to build Jersey City. Jersey City really would have been, that's the new Newark for all practical purposes. So we talk about how to look at state pension funds and county and city, university, labor and church funds. Where is the money? How much is there and who's managing it? Those are three very significant questions. How much money is there? Where is it? Who's investing it? And we must grasp with those questions, begin to fight for our share of it.
The president of City National Bank, Preston Pinkett, was there at the summit meeting, and we discovered that there is very little investment made, even in terms of the kinds of monies that's involved with the education institutions.
Labor pensions, well, we're having membership, labor pensions and monies, and church and university foundations and pension, state and pension fund monies are not invested where we live, and that becomes this day's challenge. I would make the case that the first stage of our struggle was to end slavery. The second stage to end legal Jim Crow. The third stage to end denying the right to vote. The fourth stage is access to capital, industry, and technology. You can be out of slavery, out of segregation, and have the vote and starve to death. Because without that, then you've been asked to dive into a swimming pool without water.
Your involvement in the civil rights has continued to keep focus on national concerns involving public policy trends. The effort to change the Electoral College. Are there any details as to what changes are being considered?
Well, those who once denied blacks, women, and students the right to vote have never stopped trying to take it back. So this last election, you saw them using, trying to deny early voting, trying to make seniors show their birth certificates, all forms of intimidation. We got the right to vote in 1965, but it was not just for blacks only. Blacks couldn't vote. White women couldn't serve on juries. 18-year-olds couldn't vote. Students couldn't vote on campuses. You couldn't vote bilingually. So it's been a constant struggle to protect the integrity of our democracy and to protect the right to vote. Now they're trying to manipulate the Electoral College in yet another way. We'll never give up on having an even playing field for our right to vote and to have that vote to count and be protected. That's an ongoing struggle.
The horror of gun control is deeper than the number of deaths. An evil culture continues to develop hostility against control. How do we address this as a disease?
It is a disease. It's a mental disease. It's a huge sense of fear. Americans own 300 guns. There's not one black gun shop in America. There's not a black gun manufacturer in the world. And so it is a huge for-profit industry selling guns and peddling fear and killing people. We lost fewer than 6,000 soldiers in Iraq in 10 years. We lose 32,000 a year at home to gun violence. And moreover, not only gun violence, but 100,000 are injured who don't die. So it's a huge health cost and pain and fear and intimidation and control. And in Chicago, you get a combination of guns in and drugs in and jobs out. You have a very toxic cocktail.
You have been very active in terms of raising the reality about how leadership is consistent. And even in your effort to become president, you did it in a manner that most individuals would not have been interested, just by virtue of the fact that there was a need to make people aware that it can be done. Now we do have a black president. Do you see this being the purpose for why you drove so hard at becoming a national figure on that level?
Well, you know, there are certain advantages in having Barack Obama as a president because of his intelligence and insight. Also, race not become the impediment it has been historically. The same is the reason why a woman should be president one day, or a Latino or an Asian. One should not be inhibited by their race, religion, or gender from becoming president. But then there are limitations to being president. President, for example, can appoint Supreme Court justice, but does not control the Supreme Court. So right now, while Barack Obama has been elected twice, the Supreme Court has two devastating lawsuits. One lawsuit is remove race as a factor in access to education. That's ethnic cleansing if they prevail on that. Another one is to remove Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which would stop the voter enforcement protection. So that could very well happen at the same time, you see, so that thing the president can and cannot do. And that's why street action is important. President Truman signed the executive order for the military to be desegregated because blacks who had been in World War II demanded it. The Eisenhower sent troops to Arkansas because blacks tired of segregation demanded it. We have the right to vote because we demanded it. And so the people who are locked out must light their candles to cast away the darkness. Well, Herb, we're here with you again, and I think that what's critical is that we continue to grow. We are now growing at a tremendous rate with political consciousness, but our economic consciousness and demands must run parallel. And then when that happens, you are not only free but equal. Today we're free but not equal. We're free but not equal. Freedom is growing. Equality is getting further away from us. We must fight now for the equality battle. The reason we do so well on the football field, frankly, the playing field is even. The rules are public, goals are clear, referees fair, and the score is transparent. But beyond the ball field, playing field is not even. That becomes the unfinished business.